Welcome to My 70s on SRB Radio with me, the Gabby Cabby, in association with Griffiths Clothing and Diamond Show Events and supporting the Jeff Astle Foundation. With me today is one of the two kings of Birmingham of the 70s, and we're going to have a chat about his new book, A Little Is Enough. I'll give you Mr. Brian Little.
Good to be back.
Brian, jumping towards that microphone, please, sir.
No problems.
And this is going to be, we're going to dedicate this, Brian, to young Sophie. She's a little girl who's 10 years of age, who sadly, 2 Christmases ago, lost her mum. And I think it's awful to lose your parents at any time, but at such a tender age and just before Christmas. Her mum's name was Alison Buggins, so in loving memory we're going to dedicate this show to her, and to all the Aston Villa family, and to Nick Lynch, who's took it upon himself to do some wonderful things for Sophie and to try and put a smile on her face. And it was your birthday, your 65th birthday,
yes.
Sunday, and Aston Villa put a smile on your face as well, didn't they?
Yeah, it was probably more of a worrying day than ever, you know. I mean, I think when I knew people at the club knew it was my birthday, you know, at some stage I was expecting, now, well, they're going to surprise me, or they're just going to keep it. I mean, if the scoreline had been somewhat different at half-time, that the cake might not have come in the room, to be honest. I wasn't sure, you know, but we managed to get 2 quick goals just before half-time. Yeah. And then everybody was feeling a lot better. But yeah, it was a great day for me personally. Over the years, I've seen some, you know, really tough games against the opposition, as I would look upon it. But also had some great times as well, you know. And you know, it was a. I'm not sure how to describe the game, because there was plenty goals and there was plenty entertainment in that respect. I think you put your footballing head on, and you know, as a footballer or a football manager, or what you're going, what wasn't the, you know, there was, each side would say we made too many mistakes and things like that. So from that point of view, you know, I think the managers will both be picking a lot of things out of it and saying to the players, you know, we've got to do this better or that better. But ultimately, winning that game is probably what it's all about, to be honest. So from a Villa point of view, and from my point of view, it was a decent day's work. And
you're right, because you look at players, and if you're looking at the 2 11s, then Aston Villa are the better team. They've got more money, they've got better players. Birmingham come and done a job, and I thought early doors certainly left a bit on Jack Grealish. I think Birmingham identified Grealish as the danger man and made sure they were going to get close to him.
Well, I think that's the norm now. You know, I mean, Jack, as most people would say, is being fouled more than any other player in the division.
30 times more than anyone else.
I think to the point, that's why sometimes people are looking at him going, no, get up, you go. But, you know, because of the contact he has, he's for his age, he does really well at riding the tackles, at being ready for the tackles, at understanding when the tackles are coming. I mean, he almost has eyes in the back of his head now, and that's a tribute to how aware he is of what's going on around him. And some people have said, he's going down too early, but it's a foul, and there are fouls in the modern game, and they're fouling him. The further away he is from the opposition goal, the more often he gets fouled, and that's a definite stat. But no, credit to him for getting on with that. And yes, it's what everybody does when they play the Villa these days. They look at Jack and say, right, if we can stop that, that's stopping a fair percentage of the flow of the balls that can give us problems. But, you know, in recent weeks now, the team have started to score goals from different areas, from all sorts of players. There's pace up top, and they're playing to that pace. So, you know, there's more to it now than Jack. I think, you know, Tammy is now beginning to find his feet. Jonathan Codge is beginning to enjoy the role on the left-hand side. Connor is always a threat from set pieces. Chesney from set pieces again. So there's a lot in that team which can score. But quite rightly so, Jack gets a lot of praise. I'm a big fan of him. He's a lovely lad, and you know, I'm just hoping my son doesn't click into this because he got a nice present off Jack for Christmas.
Well, I mean, half of my family are Villa, so I was watching it in my house with my one granddaughter and a Villa kit on, and young Arla, the other granddaughter, who's a Villa supporter. As soon as you say Jack Grealish, she goes woo woo. She's one.
Yeah.
So and I think the way that he plays, he almost plays like a matador when he invites the challenge. And then takes it.
Yeah, he has a great ability in the understanding of what the situation is, how tight the situation is, which way to go. And I think the most important thing for players like him is, and what a lot of people don't appreciate, it's his first touch.
Yeah.
His first touch generally takes him away from trouble, or his first touch protects the ball from the opposition. Whereas a lot of players and there's still a lot of players playing the modern game, the first touch, they're that concerned about bringing it down properly, they're not aware of what's going on around them. Jack has the ability to bring it down, but be aware of where the ball needs to go to. And it's easier said than done, let me tell you. Because there is a saying in football, which I've used many times, and I know lots of other coaches would use, play after his first touch. Yeah. Just watch his first touch and play on him. Yeah. Whereas with Jack, basically, he's too clever for that. Yeah. So his first touch is generally a safe touch.
Mm. And the second touch is in his head.
Absolutely.
He knows where he's going. So what we're talking about, Villa Birmingham City derby, is let's go back to 1975, because we're going to talk about your book. So we're going to wander back to 1953 in Newcastle, where you were born. But while we're in that ballpark at Villa Park, a 2-1 win for Villa. Birmingham took the lead. You played against Withy that day, although Peter last time didn't think that he did.
He did, yeah.
But Withy did play.
Yeah.
You certainly played, and you scored the winning goal.
Yeah.
What was your memories from that game? Because you was 21 years of age when you scored that winning goal, when you robbed Kenny Burns.
Yeah. Again, I mean, you know, I'd had my Birmingham playing in the intermediate league on a Saturday. We'd play Birmingham in youth team. From the age of 15, I was playing Birmingham City against people, and there were rough games as youth team players, you know, in the intermediate league on a Saturday. Then we had this monumental FA Youth Cup game against them in 1972, where we had 21,000 at Birmingham City watchers and 19,000 at Aston Villa. We drew there and beat them at Villa Park. So 40,000 people watched a youth game in 1972. And that was on the basis of people like myself and Trevor, Kenny Burns. We had John Gidman. There was a load off each team went through and became first team players. And it was a terrific game of football. So I knew about the rivalry. Then they get into the first team to play against Birmingham City, and I remember the fact that I think that game Chico scored the first goal. We were 1-0 down. Trevor finished a goal at what was then the Whitton end. Yeah. And in the second half, I remember a long ball. Frank Carradis flicked it on. I can see it all round. It's clear as anything in my mind. Kenny Burns is going to get to the ball first, but it starts to ride away from him, so he sort of tries a sliding tackle on the ball to get over it, but it's sort of caught between his legs. I just nip in, take it off him. I remember the keeper coming out too quick, so I've just side-footed it. It's, you know, a lot of people would look at it and think, well, they only side-footed in, what's going on there? But the keeper came out too quick, and as he was still on the move coming out, I just managed to pick the moment and just basically side-footed into the bottom corner. So, and you know, the celebration, I look back and that, you know, I've seen it on YouTube a couple of times, and the celebration, I mean, you just put one arm in the air and roll around, but you know, I think if I was playing today, I'd be running all over the pitch because everybody gets this really excited. But no, it's just, you know, hand in the air, I've scored a goal. Oh, by the way, it's against Birmingham City. Oh, it's the biggest game of our season, But so there's so many things that have changed about the game. But yeah, it was a goal that I always remember. My other one, which I remember more than anything else as well, would be at St Andrews, where Dennis Mortimer played me out on the right-hand side. I whipped a ball round the back, and Andy Gray nipped in and scored a goal, which was for a 1-0 win. So I have an assist and a goal-scoring one against... And we didn't play Birmingham that many times at senior level when I played, but they were hard games. There were a lot of things that stick out in my mind. Alberto Tarantini's tackle on John Robson, which is an absolute standout.
He took some stick Robbo did against Bromwich, didn't he?
He did. I remember Kenny getting them as well. And, but the Tarantini one on Robbo was the one that stuck out more. I mean, yeah, there were rough old games in those days, but great games. We loved it, and afterwards we actually got on pretty well with each other, to be honest. So, but yeah, I've a long history of derbies at youth level and at first team level, and I still feel involved now. When the derbies are on now, I'm like, I went up to see and I saw the lads on the day before the game on the Saturday, sorry. Just wished them all the best, and shook a few of the lads' hands and just reminded them how important it was. Not that I had anything to do with the game, but it's just nice to see the lads, and they were in good nick on the day before the game. Took them a bit of time to get going.
Yes, it did.
On Sunday,
yeah.
But ultimately they did well enough.
And how much would you have liked to have played in that game?
Yeah, I think you can't help. You can't help it. I'm like you say, 65 on Sunday, the day of the game, and even when you're sitting there, the adrenaline's going through, and you suddenly think, even though I've had my knee done, I think I could run a little bit. But yeah, it could be brilliant. I mean, you wish you could play forever.
It never goes, does it?
No, you watch the game, you're studying the game, you're picking on the game, you applauding when people do well. There were moments in that game that individuals can feel really proud of and will remember, like me. Here we are 40 years on, and I can still recall that goal like it was yesterday. So, the good thing is I know that the likes of Alan Hutton, Jack Grealish will remember those goals for many, many years.
And it means so much more to score a goal in a derby, in a local derby, when you've got that affinity to the football club, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think I can look back, as I've said, 40 years on, and I'm still connected with the club.
Yeah.
So from my point of view, fantastic. I still remember the Youth Cup game, very much so. Again, I was playing in a youth team with my brother, which is fantastic, and people like Joe Gallagher were playing against us. There was some Stevie Bryant, all of those sort of lads, good players. They were good lads. All went on and had decent careers. So you look at the team sheet and you look back at it. If it was in front of me now, you'd see most of those lads went on and had a decent career out of those youth days.
Yeah.
So that's 40 odd years ago, and you still have got football etched through your bones, sort of thing.
Now let's wander back to 25th of November 1953. You were born in Newcastle.
Yeah.
When did you start playing football? Obviously, you got your younger brother.
Well, it was all schools football. So basically, we started playing at junior level. So that would be infant school to start with, and not
with a stone or a tennis ball.
Yeah, well, there was nothing like there is today. So, but basically, when I went to junior school, which would be, I think from the age of about 9-year-old, where we started playing football, and just getting into the school team and playing with some of my friends, and but it was only school football, and everything else was just outside the house with something down on the ground. You take your jumper off and make your goals and play on the grass. When I pop up and see my mum now, she still lives in the same place. A little house with a big grass thing outside, but nobody's playing on it now.
No, it's mad, isn't it?
And she always says to me, "Oh, look, that's where you used to play football." I say, "I know. We used to put our coats down there, and there'd be at least 10 aside playing it, but basically, football was self-taught.
Yes.
It wasn't on football.
Yeah.
It was self-taught. We played on the grass, and lads from different streets came along, and we'd always meet up. But my first competitive stuff would be school football at a school called Dean House.
Okay.
Dean House Juniors, and out of that team, there's a lad called Colin Morris, and Colin went to play on for Sheffield United. So even from the little town of Peterlee back then days, two of us became professional footballers, which is quite great, really, in many respects. Tiny little school, and in those days I was a little right winger, and was quick and lively, but always small, always tiny, often when we played sort of lads a little bit older. When I went to senior school at the age of 11. I was straight in the under-15 side.
Blimey.
And I've got some pictures at home where,
Wow.
you know, the 15-year-olds are like men.
Yeah.
And there I am, a little boy on the end, and people will say, what are you doing playing with them? You couldn't play with them. You know, like, the lads almost with beards playing 15, 16.
Yeah.
So I was in the under-15s when I was 11.
Wow.
And yeah, I look at the pictures, and it was, it was crazy, really. But that's really when it started kicking in a little bit, and people said, "Oh, you're playing at that age already." And then from the age of 13, I started attracting attention at clubs, my local clubs. Yeah. I went to Port Vale when I was 13 and a half. Okay. And I've shown you the picture of myself and Sir Stanley Matthews. Yeah. Stanley Matthews was manager of Port Vale. And they were starting a scouting thing, and he based a lot of his scouting at that time of saying the North East was a hotbed for young footballers.
Yeah, it always has been.
So I actually went down to Port Vale with my mum, my dad, my two brothers, and a bus full of other families with one player from each. But he brought the whole family down for 3 days, and we played some matches at Leek Town Football Club. And I remember then even Sir Stanley saying to me then, it wasn't Sir Stanley then, but Stanley Matthews said to me then, "Oh, I'm going to sign you, I want you to sign you." But he left Port Vale a year later. But my first ever club I went to was Port Vale. And I go back to Vale Park occasionally. I speak to their chairman quite a bit, and Norman, who I've met a few times, met him at Wembley at the playoff final and everything, and we had a good chat. So, but I remember saying to him about Port Vale. So that's where it all started. Being shipped down to Port Vale with a load of other Geordie lads with their families, had a 3-day trial, and I was getting into the world of football, really.
Was you still playing on the right wing as Stan played, or was you an inside forward by then?
I played until about the age of 14. I think I started playing more as a midfield player then. I never played as a striker until the age of 17 when Frank Upton converted me into a striker. But I was always I was a midfield player from the age of 14, because I think you get to the point where, not trying to be funny, but you become like the better players in the team, so they want you on the ball all the time, want you to play. But at 14 to 15, I then started travelling to clubs. People like, I was at Leeds United, Manchester City, Sunderland, Newcastle. I came to West Brom at 14 and a half. I came to Villa after that, which was, and the story to that was, you know, a fellow called Malcolm Musgrove, who was the assistant manager at Aston Villa in the late 60s, played for West Ham, is related to my family.
Okay.
And, you know, because of communication being bad in those days, but obviously there were phone call had gone through to my aunts and uncles up in the North East that Brian was now getting trials at clubs, and that was passed on to Malcolm. Yeah. So the next thing I know, I get a letter through the post inviting me to Aston Villa on a trial basis, which was brilliant. So I went to Aston Villa at the age of 14 and a half. Yeah. And truthfully, the day I saw it, that's where I wanted to go. Yeah. I remember thinking, oh, if they offer me apprenticeship here, I'm coming here. I loved it. I remember watching a game, and the characters. I remember Dick Edwards sticking out to me. You know, as he played right back, but he was like 6'4". You know, and he was doing long throws and everything. And when I went in the dressing room afterwards, he was singing and things like that. Yeah. I just was hooked into Villa Park from the day I went there. Fortunately, they did offer me an apprenticeship, as did several clubs. But I left home at the age of 15. You know, tiny. 8 stone 2 probably, if I was soaking wet with all my clothes on, sort of thing. You know, I was a tiny little lad. So, but that's basically, I did a lot of trials as a kid, but went to Aston Villa as a 15-year-old. Left school when I was 15, which was the last year, I think, before you had to stay on for GCSEs. And so I was allowed to leave because I had a job to go to. So at 15 I left home, and the voyage began.
Your schooling, was you good at school? Did you like the academic
side? I have lots of things at school which say if he was half interested in anything that was going on in a lesson as he was in football, we'd be all right.
As most of us.
So, as definitely as we did. Yeah. But there is a piece in the book from my own writing as a 14-year-old boy, predicting what I was going to be like when I was 85. And it starts by saying, at 15 I become a football player. Yeah. and at 35 I retire and I go into television and stuff like that, and, which I've done a lot of media work and stuff like that, you know, but I retired at 50 and enjoyed the rest of my life, sort of thing. But it predicted I was a footballer. It predicted that I went into television and stuff like that. But so it was, you know, I've probably done what I needed to do in my life, I guess. I wasn't very good at school. No, I could have been a lot better than I was at school. They were just, it was just football, and most sports. I mean, I didn't play for my county football team.
Okay.
But I played for the county at basketball.
Oh, right.
I played for the north of England for basketball. I ran athletics, and I remember the one day.
What did you run?
I run everything.
Okay.
I remember winning like what we used to call the Victor Ludorums in their days, where you'd done every race. You used to run everything: the 100 metres, the 400, the 200. You know, the mile run, high jump, long jump. It was. I
bet your schoolmates loved you.
Collectively, I always won the whole thing. There was some I wasn't winning. I would never win the high jump or things like that. So I was really into everything, to the point I remember going to this run one day, and it was a cross country run.
Yeah.
And my dad never said anything to me about other sports ever. And he came up to me and just tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Don't forget, if you win this, you'll be running cross country for the rest of your life." So I came 20th, but I was right up the front. I was right up the front towards the end, and then I remember my dad said, "Be careful," because I would have been running cross countries here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
And cleverly, for once in my life, I took some notice of somebody and finished 20th. But I could have ended up having to do cross countries, which might have affected how my football went, so to speak. So, and that was the only thing he ever said to me about sport, in all fairness.
Okay.
He always encouraged me.
Yeah.
Because my brother and I went to different schools, so my mum or my dad would either watch us play. We always played at the same time. We often played against each other, which was pretty difficult. But my mum would always stand on one side, and my dad would stand on the other side if we were playing against each other. So it was crazy. But my parents were brilliant. You know, we used to there used to be every single football match we played at school, and but you know, just encouraged us. And as I've said, the only advice he gave me was not to become a marathon runner, really, which was quite good.
Was your dad or your mum sporty? Did you get
no?
the genes from...
my mum's brothers, wartime, were all footballers in the northeast of England, but obviously the war and stuff like that affected. They were all played local football. Mm-hmm. My uncles on my mum's side were all football players, and in the local area of like Linemouth and Newbiggin and Ashington, where they're right in the northeast, thick of the northeast. They were like well-known local footballers, but never really went beyond that, you know. Yeah.
And Ashington Town, and where, of course, the Charltons.
The Charltons, I mean, down the road from Jackie and Bobby and that, absolutely. I mean, the families know each other and things like that. I've met Bobby and Jackie on Jack on lots of occasions. You know, I even played in a Bobby Charlton select team once, which was a great honour to me, sort of thing. So I've been in his company a few times, but that was later on in life.
But that dressing room at Aston Villa as a 15, 16-year-old boy, you must have learnt an awful lot.
Do you know what?
Being around them men.
At 15, and I still look back at it now, and it doesn't happen today, but 15, you know, I remember, and I you're right, because I taught myself, there was 3 things I said to myself when I went in, because it was a little bit scary, well, a lot scary, and I taught myself to look, to listen, and to learn. Yep. Because there was a lot of things I had to learn from that weren't good. There were an awful lot of... I mean, the dressing room in 1969, for me, as a 15-year-old kid leaving home, the dressing room was a theatre. Yeah. There was something going on in every corner. You know, you'd have Barry Hall, Chico Hamilton and his mate sitting in the far corner having a cigarette with not a care in the world. You know, Barry Hall used to sit with his legs crossed, lighting one cigarette to the other, which I've told people before. And then you'd have the younger ones who were cheeky and doing things and like cutting people's socks up and what have you, but hiding behind a newspaper, you know. But they're actually terrified because they've probably picked on George Curtis, for example, which was the stupidest thing in the world. But they'd pick on George, they'd cut his socks up and hide behind a newspaper, giggling and like, but actually terrified, because he used to come up, get hold of one, and just pick them up by the ears and hold them against the wall, and they're all laughing, but they're actually thinking, "I'm glad that's not me." The things that went on. And then there was because football in those days, there was no subs for a first team. You were either in the first team or the reserve team. So when the team sheets went up, there was, the disappointment on the ones who weren't playing because they weren't getting the appearance money, weren't getting bonus money, and there was a real. There were periods in the dressing room where it was very ferocious, where someone was really angry and they'd be chucking stuff everywhere and swearing about the manager and all sorts of things, And as a kid, you're watching all that, and it was. It was, when you want, there was lots of things. On top of that, they'd shout for cups of tea, and if you put too much sugar in or not enough sugar in, you used to get hammered by them. So there was it was the old apprentice, and you were, as an apprentice, I swept the dressing room, cleaned the dressing rooms, wiped the walls, cleaned the toilets, cleaned the baths, swept the terrace, and all of that, prior to actually the priority, which I thought was football, but as an apprentice, it wasn't. As an apprentice, unless you got beyond that, that's all you pretty much learned at a football club, was how to clean up, because you were used in that capacity. So it was a great learning curve. I'd never cleaned my boots before. I'd never even cleaned my shoes when I left home. My dad had done all that, as well as work down the pit, shifts and all sorts of things. So it was a massive eye opener for me. And the first few months, it was pretty difficult, to say the least. I was shy. I must have had some talent, but whether it was showing through at that stage or not, I doubt very much. At the age of 15, leaving home, not even playing for my county team, 2 years later, I was in Aston Villa's first team. Which something happened, and I don't know what it was, but I learnt an awful lot by listening and making my own opinion on things, not going with the flow, and people appreciated that. So I was a quick learner. I learned very quickly, but I saw a lot of things which I can understand why today we have this, the academy system and everything, and how players are developed. It is much better. There was a lot of lads who fell by the wayside because they just couldn't hack it. It was tough. It was hard work being an apprentice in the early days.
Your debut, it gave you your debut, was it Tommy or was it Vic?
Vic Crow would have given me my debut. Tommy Doherty left within the first season I was there. I think it was probably January time. We were bottom of the league and really struggling. Tommy, I mean, again, I can look back and for whatever reason it didn't work for him there. I mean, I don't know the whys and wherefores, but there was a lot. As I've said, when I was in the dressing room, you sensed and you felt and you could hear all the things that were going on, and there wasn't a rapport in the dressing room, and it was not that I understood it, but and I didn't know whether it was the norm or not by then. But there was a lot of unhappiness around the first 6-8 months of me being there. The first team, I remember them beating Huddersfield 4-1, and I still remember that game because I think it was around the October time, and everyone thank God we're back now, we can play, but they weren't, and the team just continued to struggle and struggle and struggle, and there was lots of fallouts. I can remember, I could hear fallouts going on around me. And Tommy and Arthur had a lot of trouble with the players, as did the players with the two management staff, So that was, and one of the things when they left in the January, it was a massive change for me because Graham Leggett, who was the youth coach, left as well, and in came a fella called Frank Upton, who genuinely was probably one of the major reasons I got on as much as I did. Frank, after 2 weeks, said to me, "You're not a midfield player. You're not a wide player. You're a striker. Because when we play training, you finish easy. You stick the ball in the corner better than anyone else. And yes, you can pass, and yes, you can do this. But you're quick, you're nimble. You're not strong yet, but you're going to be a striker." And he put me up front and changed my whole. Within 12 months or so, I was like knocking on the door of the first team, really.
Your debut, who was it against?
Torquay United. My full debut was Torquay.
Yeah.
I came on as a sub against Blackburn Rovers in the October of 71. We were winning 4-1, and I'd travelled with the first team quite a few times even by then. So I went on as a sub in that 4-1 game. But then the rest of that season was concentrating with the youth team trying to win the FA Youth Cup because we were at a great run. And when we'd won the Youth Cup, I got my full debut at the end of the season against Torquay, where we won 5-1. And I scored in that game, which was great.
You also scored a hat-trick, I think, against Oldham.
Yes.
But you also missed a penalty when you tried to nutmeg the goalkeeper.
Yes. By then,
that was something within your character. You were different.
By then, I had developed this unbelievable sort of stubbornness character who was liked to show off. Well, I don't know if I showed off. I just did things that seemed to me to be. You know, the ball come to me, and if I was watching the bounce, I don't know how. I mean, I can't do it with my knees now, but it would bounce, and I could flick it over my head while I was running. And people often say, lads, I was speaking to someone even 2 weeks ago, who straight away said, "Oh, I used to love the way you flick the ball over your head." And I went, "Yeah, but that's just the sort of thing that I did, and I didn't really think of it as showing off. It just was a way of me." So I developed this, I think, through Frank. I mean, and playing up front and scoring goals and dribbling people and being allowed to do the things that as a winger that I was in a dangerous area. There was lots of things that just clicked into place for me, and I was getting stronger. You know, I was growing up a little bit. But my hat trick and things like that were, and the penalty. I mean, it's a great story because, you know, I'd scored 2. It's pretty much the last kick of the first half, and there's a penalty, and I'm taking it, and everybody's going, "No, you're not," and I'm going, "Yes, I am, I'm taking it." And then I can hear Ron Saunders on the sideline. I can hear him going, "Don't!" He's screaming, "Not him! He's not taking it! Get the ball off him!" And they're all saying, "No, you can't take it. You'll get slaughtered or whatever." Even if I'd scored, he was going to slaughter me.
Yeah.
But I thought, and I was being really clever by then. And you know, when you see people chip goalkeepers and that now, well, it's like the norm, isn't it?
Yeah,
like,
Panenka done it first, 76, yeah.
I genuinely tried to nutmeg the goalkeeper. And I thought, he'll move, because generally they jump in the air, and I thought, when he jumps in the air, I'll just stick it through his legs.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen. He saved it, and he was just waiting for me. Ron just waited for me the whole time. And the half time was just 15 minutes of me just getting pummeled by him, which was, I understand. I mean, I haven't gone into management now. I can understand it. I mean, I remember Yorkie taking a penalty at Sheffield United later on in my career, but he scored. But he chipped the goalkeeper, you know, and I'm like going, when he's going, I'm going, no. But he scored, but it worked. But so, but Ron definitely, you know, I mean, he hammered me. But at the same time, I went out second half, got the hat trick, we won 6-0, and I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know how to describe it. But that was me, and I was never allowed to take a penalty after that. The lads wouldn't let me take a penalty after that. But I continued to do things in a game which, you know, were just you felt you had to do things. It was an era. I mean, I used to watch it, you know, Stan Bowles and people, George Best and all those people, and I wanted to be like them. You know, I wanted to be that type of a player, and it was just relevant to that era, wasn't it? Really, you know, most teams had like a. I'm not calling myself a maverick because I wasn't a maverick. But you kind of were.
I
want on the football field. Off the football field, no, definitely not.
Without a doubt.
Even though I had long hair and wore much long shorts and socks down, that wasn't my real personality. I was quite a thoughtful, caring, thinking type of a person.
Yeah.
But this image of on the football field, it was licensed to do things that, you know, people like the Stan Bowles and that did, and people like that who I really looked at and thought, oh, that's great. I want to do that, you know, and I could do it. So, and I think Ron Saunders, in a way, even though he used to pretend, no, I don't say pretend, but I think if you ask Tony Morley, Gary Shaw, Ron's way of dealing with those type of players was to really make it difficult for them.
Yeah.
He felt by not encouraging them, by criticising them, that actually brought the best out of them. Yeah. That was his method, and I can understand that now. I couldn't understand it at the time. But Tony Morley, I think Tony got more stick than I did. You know, but deep down he probably thought, well, I've got to give him stick because it makes him play better. And that was the way he was, and I never understood it while I was a player. But he'd often call me in, and I'd sit in his room with him, and he'd actually look at me and go, I'd love to punch you. And so I'd look back and I'd say, well, if it makes you feel better, boss, just punch me. If it makes you feel
Which was
better.
the wrong answer, wasn't it, really?
But that used to wind him up as well, you see. So
Yeah.
we had this. It was a. You know, I think deep down, both of us sort of just walk out and laugh.
Yeah.
And you know, but we did. We clashed every single day, without a doubt. So, but I look back and when I became a manager later on, not that I never. There were certain things about training and how he set his team
Yes.
up that I really inherited from him. But I couldn't be like him.
Yeah.
No way. He loved to ruffle feathers and things like that.
Again, being a player, it's so different to being a manager,
Yes,
isn't it?
absolutely.
You've got to get performances out of players. So some you put your arms around, some you're going to hammer. Everybody's got different characters.
Yeah,
haven't
and in the 70s, you know, it was a period where the manager was king.
they? Yeah.
You know, he was the king of the football club.
Mhm.
Whatever went on at that football club,
Yeah.
nothing went on without him being involved in it.
Yeah.
And Ron was, you know, one of those people who nothing went on without him
Yeah.
giving the okay to it, on and off the field, at Villa Park, in the commercials, anything and everything. He had to have a final say in everything. So, you know, they were powerful people, and you know, when you spoke to them, what they said would generally happen. You know, it wasn't a case of I'll speak to the chairman, or I'll go and see the chief executive, or we'll do the. You know, you got an answer there and then. And if he gave you a rollicking, you were getting a rollicking, and if he said you were getting fined, you were getting fined. You know, whatever. And if you were run up a hill, you were running up a hill. So. You know, it was in a different era altogether. You know, the game and the title of football manager in those days was one of you know, total control of what was going on, sort of thing.
Most difficult opponents and favourite ground apart from obviously Villa Park.
Well, I always say, you know, Paul Madeley, when I it was an England international at Leeds. My first game in the first division, as it was. I mean, just bear in mind, 1975, we got promotion back to the first division Premier League, if you want to call it that now, but as people would know, first division. We've also won the League Cup. You know, I've played exceptionally well all season. I've just scored something like 25 goals from Christmas till the end of the season. My first game, I've just played for England. My first game for Aston Villa in the Division 1 is the great Leeds United team with Bremner and everyone. And Paul Madeley marked me. I went home and cried.
Yeah.
I could never got a kick. I went home and I sat in my bed on my own and I cried. And people don't believe that of me because they say, you don't cry. But I did, because I thought, I'm useless.
Yeah.
I went home and thought, is that what they're like in this division? Is that how good they are? He was just too good for me.
Yeah.
But I learnt a lot from it. You know, I learnt, okay, so perhaps he got the better of me and I didn't try enough different things, or I didn't try to find a weakness in him, or I didn't do this. So I tried to learn from it. But Paul Madeley, to this day, I mean, and I played against Beckenbauer and people like that, you know, who were great players. But the lesson I learned from that first game back at the very top was, wow, I've got to up my game here as well, you know. I've got to find something special.
Yeah.
So that was a great education for me, playing against Bremner and Giles and Madeley and Hunter and, you know, Norman Hunter, who everybody said kicked anything that moved, but he could play as well, you know.
Yeah.
And that was the thing they didn't realise. They battered us 1-0.
Yeah.
I mean, we got absolutely hammered, you know, we just nowhere near, and yet the scoreline, there you are, 1 goal in it. But they just were too good, and Madeley was great for me. My favourite ground was always Highbury, based on the fact that I loved Arsenal. I loved going there. I remember scoring a hat-trick in the semi-final of the replay of the League Cup, and I'd scored goals there in the youth team. I remember playing in the youth team there, and I remember the marble floors as you walked in, and so the old Highbury was my favourite other ground, and scoring a hat-trick there in the late 70s, when I remember Dennis passing it through to me right at the end, and I've listened to the commentary a couple of times, and it's Brian Moore, and I'm saying, and he's saying, could this be the hat-trick? And I've just side-footed it in the bottom of the corner, which is great, you know. So, and that year I scored 2 in the final as well.
Yeah.
But the hat-trick in the semi-final at Highbury is probably my favourite moment, really. So
Best team that you faced, would it have been that great Leeds United team? Because they were, as you say, they could outplay you, they could outfight you, they could outbattle you. They were a great team, wasn't they?
They were a great team. And going to Liverpool was always the hard. You know, people go on about Liverpool, what they were like in the 70s, but I didn't realise how hard they worked. Mm-hmm. You know, people think, oh, they're great players, they don't need to work as hard as... You know, that's a really common statement in football. They're that good, they don't work as hard as you.
Work harder, don't they?
But they work 10 times as hard. And when you used to go to Liverpool, and I've been to Liverpool as a player, you know, with the Calligans and them on highways and Keegan and Toshak up top, and you can't get near them.
Yeah.
They just work. They were pulled along by the crowd, and it was an unbelievably hard place to play. But in terms of that and talent, I always remember we went on a pre-season tour of Yugoslavia, and we played a team called Hajduk Split.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I tell you what, I remember coming away from there going, wow.
Really?
Wow. They were mega talented individuals.
What year would that have been, bro?
That's in the that's again mid-70s, 76, 77. We went on pre-season tour, and we played at Hajduk Split, and they beat us 4-1 in a pre-season. And I know pre-season, but on that day I remember thinking, wow, they're talented. And again, you know, Yugoslavian players. That was the old Yugoslavia, but there is a quality of over the years. I've followed that since then, and there's a mega quality of Yugoslavian players. Well, they're all Serbian, they're different. It's all split up now. But the number of those players that are playing in Italy, Spain, France, where you look around the globe, the amount of the old Yugoslavian, as they are now, Serbian, whatever. There's some mega talented players come out of that region. So Hajduk, I remember that game and thinking, wow, there's some mega talent here. So, but you can't go away from Leeds and Liverpool here. In the 70s, they were mega strong teams, good players, hard to play against, and always an education when you played there.
Best European team that you played, because you did play in Europe with Villa, and you scored a few goals in Europe as well.
Yeah, well, I remember playing Barcelona, and I remember Ron Saunders deliberately calling Johan Cruyff the wrong name. Just reading the team sheet, he always used to read the team because it was foreign. He used to just make their names up, and he's come to Cruyff and he's gone, Joe Gruff can't play, and screwed the team sheet, and he used to throw the team sheet in the far corner. Can't play. And Cruyff was... The Villa fans applauded Cruyff when he came off. He was magnificent.
Unbelievable player, wasn't he?
You know, if I say from here, if I look 5 yards away from myself, from here to that 5 yards, he was the quickest player I've ever come across. You go beyond that, then he wasn't... You'd probably catch him up. I mean, he wasn't mega quick, like 100 yards. Or
that burst.
He had this incredible ability to go from there to there in no time at all. He was unbelievable. And when we played Barcelona, at Villa Park especially so, but they were a rough team as well. They were tough as well. I played against a lad called Migueli who just loved kicking me, and it was a nightmare. He never gave me one little piece, you know, and every little tackle was a tackle with a little bit left on and everything. So they would, you know, whilst they were talented, they were also very, very tough. So Barcelona were probably the best I'd played. But again, you know, when we played the friendly game against when Beckenbauer and Muller and all them played against it, they were a good side as well. But that was a friendly, so that was slightly different.
So was that against Bayern?
Yeah, it was. It was a friendly game, pre-season game. I remember before the game, I didn't have anything in the house. I had egg and chips before I played. I remember that.
Great preparation for Bayern.
Well, to be honest with you, you know, when I think about it, you know, we had that many different ideas on how we used to have steak and everything. You know, everybody used to say, right, you need a good steak before you play football. And it was like a treat to go on. You know, when I was a kid and we say the reserve team went to Newcastle, it was great because you were getting a piece of steak. You know, because in my digs, I used to get beans on toast with cheese on, or cheese on toast with beans on. So we said, depending on which one on the top, so we say, so do you want cheese on toast with beans on? I went, yeah, can I have beans on toast with cheese on this time, please? Yeah, so she put the cheese on top. And that was my variation of my pre-match meal, you know. It's like, so, but then we'd go to hotels and you'd get a steak before you played.
Yeah.
And then the silliest thing about that was Gidman, my best mate, he always say, put some garlic butter on my steak. And Ron Saunders would crack up, you can't have garlic butter on a steak. And I'm thinking, well, it's the steak that's doing you the problem. But Giddy would always want garlic butter on his steak. And Ron Saunders used to go wild, so he'd have to whisper it to them, put a piece of garlic butter on the steak. And then yet, that's doing no harm at all compared to the steak. So it didn't really matter. There was the preparation. When we ran, they used to stop you drinking water. Don't drink water, you can't drink water while you're running around. And you're thinking, but you need it. So it was ancient. It was, it was archaic. When I look back at 1969 through to whatever, there was old-fashioned beliefs.
Yeah.
And, I watched the lads today. I go up today. Sports scientists were starting to come into it when I was leaving Villa. But we didn't deal with anything like that. When I was at Leicester City, I tell this story a bit. We went to 3 playoff finals 3 years in a row. If we had sports scientists, we would never have come back training when we did.
Yeah.
We lost each final on pretty much June the 1st, and we came back before July.
Yeah.
Even though we'd worked an extra month compared to everyone else. We felt our disappointment was the thing to get out of our system, not our tiredness or anything. We believed in our team bonding, so we had 3 weeks breather for 3 years, and we trained every single time, all the time. Now today, a sports scientist or whatever would say, look, you've got a great chance of damaging people. We didn't damage people, but so. Our mentality was old-fashioned then, and I accept that. And today people would probably say you're not right. It won't happen. It was a bit unique, okay, but it was unique because we felt we understood our players.
Yeah.
But there are lots of things which I fully believe in now: the sports science and the preparation and the nutrition and everything and the diet. It's absolute. They're incredible now compared to how we were in our day. But no, food in going back in the 70s, you just ate what you pretty much could have, and pasta was, what's pasta? We don't know what pasta. Oh, that's awful. But anything like that, we just didn't understand. Yeah. We weren't of that. It wasn't in the build up at all.
It was very naive and
massively naive, massively. As I've said,
a lack of understanding.
Yeah, but team bonding sessions were generally organised by the management to say, go out and have a few beers together. That was that. Then they felt that was the right thing.
Yeah.
I remember when I first went to Aston Villa, they used to have a raw egg and a Guinness on a Friday. They used to have it as well. A raw egg followed by a Guinness. And I'm thinking, I'm 15, and I'm thinking, what are they doing that for? So, there's so many archaic things that I've seen in my life in football that I can move with the times and understand the times today, and I'm fully appreciative of it. But there was old-fashioned things, and I've seen a lot of those old-fashioned things in my lifestyle, so in my lifetime. But having egg and chips before you played wasn't really anything unusual back in the 70s.
77 was a great year for you. You won the League Cup. You'd won the League Cup in 75, of course. Yes. You got to the League Cup final in 71, although you were still a kid. You was only 17 back then. But 77 was Brian Little's final, wasn't it?
Yeah, the second. I mean, I played well at Sheffield. The final at Wembley was a farce. It just didn't happen. It was one of those games. Both teams cancelled each other out, ourselves and Everton. Went to Sheffield Wednesday, and that was a little bit better. But by the time we got to Old Trafford, it was second playoff, and I suppose there was going to be a winner. I still to this day have never really confirmed whether we were going to go to penalties or whatever. But we went to extra time again, and Big Chris scored a great goal, and I love Chris Nicholl. Chris was a lovely, and still is a lovely man. But for him to score from 30 yards with his left foot, I mean, if he'd headed it from 30 yards, I could have understood it really. But he was great, and then I nipped in around a lad called Neil Robinson, who actually then played for me at Darlington later on when I became a manager. He was only a kid in the team then. And the second goal was a tap-in, excuse me, from about 2-3 yards out, which everybody was so tired by then.
Yeah.
And it was the end of a year where, you know, I'd, like you say, hat-tricks in the semi-final. My brother had played in the League Cup with me that year. He played at Hartlepool. He'd scored a goal at Colchester, so he was part of the. He really was part of the group that actually got there, which is a great thing for us both. So that year and that League Cup run is very close to me, because on my birthday we played at Hartlepool and I scored 2 up at Hartlepool, where, you know, first time my mum and dad really had seen me play. So couldn't really travel down to the Midlands. I very rarely did. But I played up there with my brother in the team and scored 2. Alan scored at Colchester, which was brilliant. The semi-final, I scored in the semi-final. So there was some great times. You know, it was a brilliant era for the 70s. I loved it. I loved the group. And again, you know, people had this image of me, but, you know, when we won the final in 77, I sat at the front of the bus, just sitting there. I wasn't a very good traveller, and I didn't like travel, but everybody was drinking and champagne and enjoying it. Ron Saunders was handing his cigars out and things like that, and I can't stand smoke, you know, I can't be in a room where there's smoke, me. So, you know, there was the other side of me which was always there, which some people saw, you know, like more of a thoughtful person. I've won a game, and I wanted to remember it. I wanted to be able to think about it, and I did think about it. Whereas the rest of the lads were just sitting there drinking champagne and being daft, you know. And I sort of cut off from that, and I don't know where that side came from, but I didn't mind a night out with John Gidman, I think, but I've never been a group night out person. You know, me and Giddy used to sneak out. we got into trouble a few times, but I preferred sneaking out than doing it when you were supposed to. You know, when you were supposed to, I would go, I'm not doing that. But no, it was great. But I've always been that more of a. I'm not secret. I'm private.
Yes.
I'm not a secret person, but I'm very private about, you know, how I do things or how I didn't do things.
In the 70s, any songs that bring back memories?
Maggie May.
Oh, okay.
1972.
Yeah.
FA Youth Cup final. All through the FA Youth Cup run.
Yeah.
Giddy and I a typical pair of us, you know, used to run out singing Maggie May.
Yeah.
Absolute Rod Stewart, absolute certainty.
Big fan of Rod.
Well, that song,
great song.
Yeah, I mean, I like Free and Black Sabbath and Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin and all that sort of thing.
Bit like Kenny, a bit with Kenny
I'm
likes
a
that.
massive Free. I mean, Paul Rodgers, the lead singer. Paul Rodgers he's got one of the best voices I've ever heard, and he's always been like a hero of mine. But I like the Moody Blues and that as well. So I can go the other way. But music was, I like to listen to music, but not. Pretty much my own sort. I mean, wherever I'm in the house, nobody listens to my music. You know what I mean?
What would Brian Little have on in his house at the moment? Then
I would, if I was listening to a song, I'd probably put something like "Stairway to Heaven" on or something like that. You know, just something very rocky.
Yeah.
All Right Now, I love that song. You know, I like Free. I think they were probably my favourite of all of them. So, but I like that type of. But then, on the other hand, I could often then switch over and go completely the other way and listen to James Taylor.
Yeah.
So, but more of a rock type stuff in the 70s, and that's why, you know, again, I always go on about John and myself, you know, but we were pretty sort of. If we were planning a night out, you know, you could. The hipsters were in the corner with the 32-inch bell bottoms, the silk shirt, you know what, and the 2 gold chains you'd have round your neck and all that. So me and Gidman used to really give it the full lot when we did go out, and we did get into a little bit of bother here and there and everywhere, but in a nice way.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't rowdy, we were just daft.
If you could replay one game. As a player or a manager, what game would it be and why?
Player or as a manager?
Yeah.
Well, that's tough because of the fact that when I went into management, I probably had a fair amount of success. I've been promoted with Darlington.
You did, yeah.
I won 2 championships with Darlington.
Yeah.
Leicester 3 at playoff finals. Villa my League Cup final. And then I've played in League Cup finals and things like that in the past. So it is a hard one. Because there's 2 or 3 that are very significant to me in terms of being at Darlington as a young manager, winning the GM Vauxhall Conference as it was in them days. And we went to Welling and we needed to win and we won 1-0. And a lad called Gary Coatsworth scored the goal. For me, it's a massively iconic game for me.
Yes.
Because I'd had a caretaker role at Wolves, which I got the sack from. When I first went to Darlington, in the first 2 months, I took over towards it, and they got relegated to the conference. So I had to do well. If I hadn't won the conference, I probably wouldn't have gone on to do anything. So that's a game which means a lot to me. Winning at Welling. When I was at Leicester, we had a game which was massive for me as well. We played Cambridge United in the first semi-final of the playoffs, and we beat them 5-1.
Yeah. And
we'd lost to them 5-1 earlier in the season, and it was at Filbert Street, the old Filbert Street. It was a brilliant night. Yeah. My team played as a team performance. I reckon that's probably as a manager, that's probably one of my best team performances ever. When the night we beat Cambridge, and so that always really sticks in my mind as being a great night of football. Again, I've gone to Leicester. I'm under pressure because they're saying I play with 3 centre-backs, so I'm a bit negative. And the old Frank Worthington, Keith Weller things, which was getting thrown down my throat all the time.
Yeah, that was a great team.
Great team.
Yeah.
Great showman team.
Birch and all as well.
Birch was at the club. And I'd gone to Leicester and I was playing this 3 centre-backs and people were saying I was a little bit negative. But we were actually playing decent football.
Yeah.
But to get to a final in my first season at Leicester took a lot of that.
Yeah.
You're not the Keith. Where's Keith Weller? Where's Frank? Who's our Frank Worthington? They were really obsessed with that era.
Yeah.
And so that was a massive thing for me. But the top of the lot must be my managing Villa to the League Cup final.
Yeah.
Because of that 15-year, I still see myself as this 15. I can still see me as a 15-year-old walking down the first steps into Villa Park.
Yeah.
With a lad called Roy Stark, who was in digs with me, who was the captain of the youth team, who was the same age as me. But I thought he was a man and I was a little boy. And Roy looked after me for the first year. Roy was brilliant to me, Starkey. And he was the captain of the youth team when we got... But walking down, catching the bus from my digs to Villa Park the first morning, when the landlady said, right, you've got to walk 2 miles down the road and the bus stops over there, just catch the number 7 and you'll be at Villa Park. No guidance, nobody picking us up, nobody taking us there, and I'm 15.
Yeah.
And Roy, like at 15, was like a man. Come on, off we go, and he took me there. So I still see that 15-year-old boy going to Villa Park, and then I see myself at 41 going back as a manager, and then I see myself winning the League Cup, finishing 4th in the Premier League, getting to the semi-final of the FA Cup in 1 season. Yeah. I mean, it's just I can't. It's just hardly not true. It's almost like a fairy tale to me. I sometimes have to pinch myself to say, how did I, from what I was as a little kid at 15 leaving home, how did I get to where I am today?
Yeah.
How do I talk like I talk? I don't know, because when I was a kid, I never said 2 words to anybody. My mum always says to me, and she always said, we'll get Alan down there with you as well, because he'll look after you when he comes, my younger brother.
Yeah.
Because I was that quiet.
Yeah.
I was very deep and thoughtful. Then this other side of me developed through football, which has been quite incredible, really.
So, when you got on the pitch as a player, or when you managed, was it Brian Little, or was it almost some alter ego of Brian Little that gave you that confidence to go and do that?
I've thought about that loads of times, and there is a like when I had to retire, and I changed my hairstyle and all sorts of things, and I looked in the mirror and thought, well, I can't really be a youth coach with all this hair, so I had to. There has been a lot of like looking in the mirror and talking to yourself and being honest with yourself, and learning from other people. Frank Upton, when, like I said, as my youth coach, always came to the training ground every day with a shirt and a tie on. Yeah. So when I became a youth coach, haircut, shirt and tie, every single day. And it's not an act. It's well, is it an act? I don't know. It may well be.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes you look at yourself, and as a football player, I could get away with anything. You know,
Yep.
as long as I did what I needed to do on the football field, it didn't matter that I had long hair. But deep inside of me,
Yep.
when I didn't play very well, I went home and thought, how do I play better?
Yeah.
And people wouldn't probably understand that when they saw me as a kid. They'd think, oh, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
But I did.
Yeah.
You know, I did. I remember playing against Dennis Stewart at Man City, and he was brilliant. And I never got a kick, and I was up the other end of the pitch looking at him going, God, what a player. We played them 2 weeks later, and I'd gone home the night of we'd got beaten, and I thought, there's things he's done. We beat them 3-1 at Villa Park. I scored 2.
Yeah.
And I know I played well.
Yeah.
But I played well because I went home and watched him and thought, I've got to do that. So people didn't see that side of me.
Yeah.
So, yes, okay, so I changed the image, but I don't think it made me, it wasn't a different person.
Yeah.
It was still,
Yeah.
Brian Little, despite having long hair, was still a very thoughtful, deep, honest, committed person to trying to do something well in his life.
Yeah.
Which I have a saying every day in my life, just try and be a good person. Every day I get up,
Yeah.
I try and be a good person. And I fall out with people occasionally, but I genuinely try and be a good person. It's something I've always tried and always thought of. And my dad always said to me, you know, even when I started playing football and doing well, don't change. Remember where you come from. And I do. I still remember that. I'm the son of a miner.
Yeah.
And proud of it.
Yeah.
You know, and he was my biggest hero, still is my biggest hero, because he took me to the mine shaft when I was 14.
Yeah.
He took me to the coal face. He took me to the mine shaft that took him down 4 mile under the North Sea and said, that's where I work. Don't follow in my footsteps. And it was brilliant, you know. So I try. I'm a pretty deep person, as you can see. I am, but I have this, you know, when I'm out, I don't, you know, I'll laugh and joke with anybody, have a bit, but I am very thoughtful and I try really hard to do things right, even though the period in my life in the 70s was a period where I was allowed to just be something else, be this showy-offy person as a footballer.
While we're on the thought process, how difficult or how easy was it to leave Leicester, where you've been very successful, and go to Villa? Because if memory serves me right, you were, if you couldn't go to Villa, you were going to retire from the game, wasn't you?
I'd have packed
You
in.
wanted that much.
It's just that you have to do what you believe in. I mean, there are a number of times I knocked on Ron Saunders' door and said, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
He'd say, you are, and I'm saying, I'm not. He'd say, but the session is carrying Frank Carradus up a hill, and I'd go, I'm not doing it. And I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I'd say to him, there's no logic in me carrying somebody up a hill, and I'm not doing it. So when Aston Villa came looking for me, I spoke to the chairman of Leicester, and I was speaking to someone in Leicester the other day about this, and I said, ultimately I'd said to the chairman, I love it here, I'm happy, but if Aston Villa want me, you've got to understand that that is the only club that I will want to work for outside of Leicester City. And if there's an opportunity to do it now and it's taken away from me, that's okay, I can understand that, but if it comes now and it never comes again, I'll never forgive you for the rest of my life. So I said, I'm being totally honest with you here. If Aston Villa want me, I really want to go. And that was before you had contracts with get out clauses, compensation clauses. And I think this case was one of the cases that of premeditated, was a premeditation to all of this, everybody having a contract clause. But the chairman of the Leicester said, I understand, Brian, I really understand, and honestly, if they do come, we will let you talk to them. 2 days later, he's telling the press that I don't care, he was in the press going, I don't care if Aston Villa come for him, he's not going. So I just went up there and I wrote a letter and I took it to the board and I said, I need to see the board. And the letter said quite simply, look, I'm not falling out with anybody, but if they come, you've got to let me do it. It's a one-off thing. But if you actually stop me doing this as a career, if you stop me doing this, I can't walk in here and work with you. So I'll just pack in. I seriously, honestly, truthfully will go home and do another job. Even if I don't work in football again, that's fine. If you want to stop me working in football, that's fine. But I won't work for you, and I wouldn't work for them again. When John Gregory knocked on my door and said, I want to be a manager, brilliant, Gregor. If that's what you want to do, off you go. I didn't want him to go.
Yeah.
In fact, it was probably the thing that made my little bit at Aston Villa go a little bit backwards.
Yeah.
But I sacrificed myself because he wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And when people have knocked on my door as a player and gone, look, Gaffer, I'm not in the team enough, I need to move. All right, I'll get you another. And we sat down and worked out where. And that's the way I'm that type of a person. But yes, I would have packed in football. Why not? Why shouldn't I? Because if they want to keep my registration and keep me there, and that's fine, okay. But I would not have done that for any other club.
Yeah.
And that's a bit. I suppose some people might think, "Oh God, he's out of order," but
It's a love affair, isn't it?
but it's just something. And John Gregory said to me at the time, he said, "Look, the one thing is, you might not happen again. You've got this. This is a one-off chance.
Yeah.
It might, if whoever goes in there, if he does great, you might not ever get an opportunity to do." So ultimately, they said yes, and they did say, "Okay, we understand." And then they kicked up a bit of a fuss, pretending that they hadn't said it. But it all got. I really, the fact that I had 3 great years there, and I'd love to go back to Leicester and sell a few books and bits and bobs like that.
Do you ever go back to Leicester?
I do go back.
Yeah,
I've been back like quite a few times
Yeah.
over the years. And I think a lot of people understand, now, yeah, okay. I mean, I've done 20, 27, 28 years of my 50 years in football connected with Aston Villa in one capacity or another. So I have to have a massive effect. Yeah, it was a really horrible period, and I hated them. I hated that. It was 2 weeks, 2 horrible weeks in my life, where I had to be stubborn. Which when I left, I've won 2 championships with Darlington. Leicester came in for me, and the chairman looked at me and went, "Brian, I don't want you to go, but I understand you've got to."
Yes.
And that's great. I respect people like that so much, because that's how I try and be with people. A number of people have knocked on my door and said, "I need to move on," and I've helped them move on. Tommy Johnson, golden character. Tommy Johnson subbed for me for 2 years virtually. Celtic come from. Phoned Tommy straight away. "Tommy, Celtic want you." "I don't know if I want to go, Gaff, because you look after me." I said, "Yeah, but it's your career." Yeah, you're right. Off I go. Tommy's one of my best pals now. Rings me every week, thanks, and keeps in touch with me.
Yeah.
I think that's. But the game has changed to the point that people now. This is where this. People moan about people having clauses in contracts, but it clarifies the situation. And if somebody wants you that badly, or if someone has put a clause in your contract saying you're worth that much to me, which is fine, and somebody wants to pay that something to get you, I agree with all that. Because it takes away all the stress and strain, falling out situations. If I signed a contract which said I'm worth X amount of pound to somebody else, I'd feel happy about that. So, yeah, I genuinely might have packed it. Well, I would have done. I would have, if they wouldn't have let me go, I'd have gone. I don't know what I'd have done, mind. But I am that headstrong, yeah.
And your book, it's almost with you now.
Yeah,
almost.
Yeah,
we're within touching distance now, aren't we?
I haven't read all the way through it. I actually could have written 10 books.
Yeah.
How
did you write it and leave things out? There must have been stuff that you wanted.
There's lots. I think there has to be a point where with having managed 10 teams, there has to be a point where you move on and do a coverage. Predominantly Aston Villa feature in it.
Yeah, it must have, yeah.
Because of my 15-year-old leaving home, and it's pretty much a 50 years of football. Yeah. It is pretty much this young kid leaving home, being stuck on a train at Durham Station on his own, and waving goodbye to your mum and dad, and going somewhere where a year earlier you didn't know where Aston was. You didn't know where Aston Villa was. No telephones, no nothing, no real communication. So it's the story of a little 15-year-old kid who went on a journey, and at 65 is still involved with Aston Villa.
Yeah.
And I've done far more than I ever thought I would do when I left. And I try and explain, as I've been explaining to you now, there are lots of things about me that didn't come out, but come out in the book. I think it's, my character, what I'm thinking, what I'm trying, my philosophy around the game comes into my philosophy about myself. I talk about things like that, but there's also the stories and the little joviality things, because there's loads of things have happened at each of the clubs that I've been at. Some nice little stories in there, But it's just something I needed to get out of my system. I've been asked for years, because there is a variation to my, and I am so different to what a lot of people think I am, really. You know, so I think it needed to come out, and hopefully a lot of people will enjoy it.
How long did it take you to put the book together?
It's been a year's
Yeah.
from the start of January to November, really, to put it all together. And as I've said, you know, I could have written a book about each club I was at.
Yeah.
You know, I genuinely could. But
Did Jersey get a mention, by the way?
yes, everything gets a mention.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they're touching on, but
Yeah.
you know, there are some other things that were so great. I mean, Jersey was a great little fleet. And
How did that
visiting
come about?
Well,
Your
just
connection
basically
with Jersey?
because they were wanting to promote themselves towards, like, they saw Gibraltar getting into the European Championship, and they've got more football on their island than Jersey. They've got a 17-team football session on the. And they were thinking, well, hang on a sec, we should. But their connection with the English FA is probably the biggest problem for them. But I just introduced them for 2 years, just made introductions for them. I even managed the team for 4 games in the end, because the head coach left. And from January to May, there was the build-up to what's called the 100th Marathi, which is the big game between themselves on the Island Games.
Okay.
So it was the 100th anniversary.
Blimey.
And they said, would you do the game leading up to the 100th anniversary? Now, I remember straight away thinking, well, if I lose that 100th anniversary, I'm going down in history here. But I actually won the game against Guernsey, who were actually full-time. Guernsey actually play in one of the English leagues.
Okay.
They play full-time in one of the English Southern leagues.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Whereas Jersey are just a representative team, but they play in their own league. And now I've introduced them to certain teams, and they're less to go over now and things like that. But Guernsey play in one of the southern leagues of the English football.
Okay.
So they're actually full time.
Yeah.
So we played them, it must be 3 years ago now that I left. And it was the 100th anniversary of it. So it's the big, like, I'm looking at, well, I know it's a big game anyway, because they don't like each other, but it's the 100th one, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? But I won.
What was the score?
1-0.
Yeah.
We won 1-0. And resigned and retired after the game. I think 1 or 2. To be honest, there was a couple of the lads went, "Why don't we have someone from the island doing this?" And I went, "You're right. Yeah, you're right. You should have someone from the island."
Yeah, get Graham Lasso.
But it never. They never could kick on. They spoke with. They went to the meeting and were voted no chance of getting into it. Which was sad for them, but they were lovely people, and it was a lovely place to visit every month. And we did a little bit of training, and I helped out with introductions, but it just never got as far as they would want it to do. But it's an interesting little spell.
And you've got a book tour, so I've got the dates, which is the 30th of November, this Friday.
Yeah,
And that's at the Forest Hotel, Station Approach in Dorridge. Guest Ian Taylor.
Taylor's
one
just
of your
popping in, and
former-
then I think he's going to pop off to the game after. He's going to nip into Solihull, but I think
because Moore's playing on
and
that
I think he's
cup game.
probably been wanted to be there. But he's definitely coming along for a short spell and stuff like that, which is great at Tails, really.
And that's £4 on the door for that one. 2nd of December, Waterstones, Sutton Coldfield, 11:30 till 2:30. 8th of December, you're up at Darlington.
Yes, I've had a lot of people from
Yeah.
there just saying, please come up. My youngest brother's coming to the game with me and things, and then we'll just sell a few books. But meeting a lot of people who've been really good to me over the last few weeks on Twitter would be good.
And then on the 9th of December, W.H. Smith in Solihull,
Yeah.
12 till 2. 13th, another one of your old clubs. You're up at Tranny, aren't you?
Yeah, Tranmere. Well, I took them to the playoffs and to the quarter-final of the FA Cup, believe it or not. We couldn't believe it. so that was great.
Who did you play in the quarter-final of the FA Cup?
Millwall, the year they got to the final.
Oh, right, okay.
And Cahill scored. Outside of Cahill, we were actually the better team in 2 legs.
Yeah. He was some player in his day, though,
Yeah,
wasn't
he was.
Tim Cahill.
Yeah.
14th, you're at Leicester City at the Supporters Club. That's 7 o'clock till 9:30.
Yeah.
And then the 15th of December, you're at home.
In my town, yeah.
Yeah,
town
you-
of
you-
Stafford.
at the Holt
All my-
Street,
all-
Holt Suite.
All my mates. All my
Villa
mates.
versus Stoke. 18th,
Sorry, that's at Stafford. Yeah, that's
Sorry,
my
yeah,
home
yeah.
side. Sorry, I'm
Sorry.
jumping ahead there.
18th, Stafford
Yeah,
Rangers.
all my mates are coming in. All my wife's friends and family, and
Oh, okay.
we'll have all them around because I live Stafford. So
right,
so
okay.
That's my neck of the woods.
So you're going from your spiritual home. Well, your home
Yes,
is
it's Villa
Newcastle.
Park. Yeah.
Your spiritual home is Aston.
Yes.
And then your home now is Stafford.
Yeah.
With Tony Daly, because Tony's
Dales.
doing some great stuff, isn't
Well,
he?
Tones
Fitness
he was one of my first apprentices.
Okay.
So we've always kept in touch with each other, and
Yeah.
he's a good lad, Tony. So that's nice.
I would like to say at Wembley with Gareth, because Gareth wrote the foreword, hasn't he? He's one of your former players as well.
What? I can't thank him enough. I mean, in the end, I got a bit because I wanted to do it properly, so I went through the FA. I thought, well, I can't ring him because that's a bit cheeky because he really can't say no then. So I messaged his secretary, his PA, and she came back and said, "Oh, I've spoken to Gareth. He'd love to do it." I said, "But he just need a bit of notice." So I said, "He's got 3 days." And in fairness, within about 2 hours, he'd written this beautiful foreword to the book for me. He's a good guy. He's a top bloke, honestly.
And he always comes across as a very articulate and intelligent man as well.
Well, that just summed
A
him up.
thinker's footballer.
Yeah, he was. He was on a. He just, and he mentions it in his forward about the fact that I put him as a centre back.
Yeah.
And within 2 months, he was an England international.
Because you bought him as a midfield player, didn't you?
Holding midfield. He was he played in different positions.
Mm-hmm.
But once he played there alongside McGrath and Eggihog, fantastic. Mind, I think a lot of us could have played it.
Yeah, I think he could have played it.
I think
with Paul McGrath.
we'll just get Paul one side of us, we'll be all right. No, but in fairness to Gareth, he was immense. He just read the games. People have often said to me, "What did you do?" I said, "Well, I just asked him to play there, and then he did everything else himself. I didn't have to say anything to him. He was just." There's a bit of danger. Oh, Gareth's cleared it. Oh, danger. Gareth's cleared it. And it was just immense. So he was a very intelligent, very, very intelligent lad, and a lovely lad with it as well.
How great was Paul McGrath? Because to most Villa supporters, he's God.
Because, well, he couldn't train.
Yeah.
And yet, he was one of them players, you'd say to him on a Saturday morning, "Are you going to be all right today?" Yeah, I'll be all right. Very quiet, but how he played and how he trained, because he couldn't hardly, he just have to go for a walk every day. His knees were that sore. But, adrenaline going through his system. I didn't see the best of Paul. Paul was brilliant for us, but I fit Paul McGrath must have been unbelievable.
Yeah.
But for us, he could backheel the ball 40 yards. How he did that, I don't know. He was brave, and the bravery side of it is the biggest thing that come through. Mm-hmm. The ball would go in the box, there'd be feet everywhere, and you'd see McGrath come through the lot with his head and just clear it. He's just he's just too good. I mean, just brilliant footballer.
Again, with football going forward and all about the Premier League and Sky and all the money, players like Paul McGrath get kind of forgotten a bit because it's all about the new players.
Yeah.
But one of the greatest defenders in my lifetime.
Yeah, without a doubt. He was immense. I mean, and you couldn't help but love him because he's just a likeable rogue, you know. He had his faults, but those faults would just stay with him. But it just a lovely man. A lovely man.
And then on the 22nd of December, Hull City, another one of your former clubs.
Yeah, I've got a lot of friends in Hull. I worked at Hull in an administration time and took them to the playoffs, and I actually dug the first piece of grass to the new ground.
Oh right.
Yeah, so I remember then thinking, oh, I'm going to have a nice new ground here.
Yeah.
But it never quite ended that way. But no, I've a lot of friends at Hull because I worked in the period where they were in administration, and we still got into the playoffs despite being in administration all season. So it was a period that was, kept the club going really. And a lot of people appreciated that.
Now at the Feethams, when you're up there at Darlow, they used to have a problem with the pitch getting waterlogged. And I remember watching it, I think on Football Focus, the one Saturday, where the groundsman had bought in these special type of worms, but he got the wrong worms, and the worms didn't go in and done the job. So he drowned about 1 million worms on the football pitch, so that a right big... You wasn't the manager in them days, was you, Brian?
One of my favourite memories of Feethams is because of the weather up there, and you would get a lot of snow.
Yeah.
We used to just ring the army base, and they used to fetch the squaddies to clear the pitch, and it was like an exercise for them. and the sergeants would stand at the side, and they'd have all these squaddies with the shovels, and they'd run with shovels on and off, and they'd clear the ground in no time at all. And the sergeants say, "Oh, that's brilliant! Anytime you got snow, give us a shout." And you got these lads, they're sweating, being shouted at. "Don't you stand still! Keep running!" They were brilliant. We loved. It's incredible. But clubs, little things like that.
Yeah.
You never forget your club
Yeah.
because of that. They're just great memories, you know, what you
And you've had great memories at every football club that you've
absolutely.
been.
Yeah.
There doesn't seem as though there's any bitter memories. I mean, as a player and as a manager, you know you're going to leave, you're going to progress, you're going to get sacked for whatever reason, move on. But you always, it strikes me you've looked back with fond memories.
Mostly, I think just leaving Leicester was sad,
Yeah.
the way it happened. And the other one would be Wrexham, that it didn't quite work for me
Yeah.
as well. But outside of that, you know, everywhere I've been,
Mm-hmm.
I've done reasonably well.
And then on the 23rd of December at the Aston Tavern, so that's just before Christmas, 4:45 to 6:45.
Yeah.
And that pretty much is up to Christmas, and then I'm sure in the new year,
Yeah.
you know, you're going to get some other dates, but that's December's dates. And your official at Brian Little official Facebook, and then you've got a website as well, all the w's.brianlittleofficial.com. So don't forget the official, guys, because that's mega important. And the hardback book is $18.99.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a crisp £20 note for it, and the paperback is $12.99. And Chris, can you just pass me your glasses, please? Because
the website's on
yeah.
there as well, so.
because I'm no, not your paper, your glasses, mate. Honestly, because I can read Diamond Show events. That's I know, but they're in my car. But the other one is Parad. You're going to have to help me here, Brian.
I can't see now.
Paradigm Wills and Legal Services.
Okay.
I hope I pronounced that right. Apologies if I haven't. Initial Fire Systems Limited, and Crescent with a lovely kind of heart crescent on there. I'm guessing they're all your lovely sponsors and people that have helped you along the way to put this book together, along with Simon Goodyear. So we've got to give Simon a good old shout as well, because he'll be watching this and he'll be going, "Little, you ain't even giving me a shout, mate. All the hard work I've done helping you, pal."
Yeah. Good. It's
So
been great.
It's been a great team effort, and Brian, thank you so much for coming in. It really is a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
And time is a wonderful thing that when you start school or when you started your career, you dislike these people in claret and blue, and they were your nemesis. And the focal point of all of my footballing arguments at Kingshurst Comprehensive School.
Yeah.
But it's been an absolute pleasure, Brian.
Thank you.
And can I wish you all the very best. Happy Christmas and a wonderful New Year, sir.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Brian.
Cheers.
Cheers, pal. Thank you.
When I think about you, I think about love. Darling, I don't live without you and your love. If I had those golden dreams of my yesterday,